Well, happy Easter. Man, it's good to see you. For those of you who are part of this church family, it's cool to be with family on special events, so thank you for being here. For those of you who I haven't seen in a while, it's good to see you. And then for those of you who maybe this is your first time that you walked into this room, hey, thanks for taking the chance and being here and worshiping with us. There are a lot of churches that you could choose from in this Raleigh area, and the fact that you chose to worship here, man, I appreciate that. Thank you. In fact, I worshiped at one of those churches early this morning, and early for sunrise service, I went to worship, and some of you are thinking, that's kind of weird, like you're a pastor of this church and you're going to another church to worship, but where I'm standing is a little bit different than where you're sitting, and so for me today, I don't know, earlier in the week I started thinking about it, and I was like, I just want to go somewhere, like start my day off and get lost and think about nothing except Jesus. And so that's what I did this morning, kind of blended into the crowd and just worship by myself. And that's my prayer for you in this room. I want you to get lost in kind of the words. I'm hoping they're not me, they're the Spirit of God talking through me. And I just want you to think about Jesus this morning, because here's what I know, here's what I believe in the depth of my heart. Then an encounter with him will change your life. It will literally change your everyday life. And so that's my hope for you. Because Easter's a little bit weird. Like it's a celebratory time in the life of a church. It's exciting. There's more people in America. Church doubles in attendance, right, on 2 days of the year, Easter and Christmas. And so there's more people, the music's amped up a little bit. Kids, like your kids are having a blast. I'm just telling you, your kids are having a blast. They've worked hard back there to make today special, so that's amped up a little bit back there. There's new people in the room, more people in the room, and so there's this reconnecting that's going on, or maybe connecting for the first time if you don't know someone. So it's kind of cool. Like there's a picture booth or whatever out there in the Studio One, so you can go and get your picture taken when you're done here. There's a lot of activity. There's a lot of work that goes on before you get into this room. And so if you're not careful, you miss what we're celebrating here. Because it's a lot of activity, but the star of the show is Jesus. Today we're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus and what he offers: forgiveness of sin, life, and life to the fullest with purpose and meaning. And you notice I use the word offers, because the crazy thing about it is, as amazing as the offer is from Jesus to us, the forgiveness of all of our sins, past, present, and future, and life to the fullest with meaning, as great as that offer is, most of the people in the U.S. and around the world refuse the offer. Maybe in this room, you've heard the offer before, but you have continued to refuse the offer that Jesus gave. Which here's an amazing fact for me. It's not that people don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus. They do. Like, according to statistics, conservatively speaking, almost 2 out of every 3 people believe that Jesus rose from the dead. So that's awesome, by the way, but it's also challenging. It's awesome because I don't have to spend a lot of time convincing you that Jesus rose from the dead. But it's challenging because there seems to be like a disconnect, or at least we underestimate the impact that his resurrection makes on the everyday. So we have to wrestle with the questions of, okay, how does what we are celebrating today impact what happens tomorrow? So does an encounter with Jesus, the resurrected Jesus, does an encounter with him make any difference at all in the everyday life of a person? Because we encounter people all the time. Like with over 1 million people just in the Wake County area, the Raleigh area, we interact with people, we brush by people. Most of the time it has zero impact on us. But then there are those times where you meet somebody and it changes your life. Like for instance, most of you know that I started dating Martha, my wife, when I was a freshman in high school. It's the first time I saw her. And the first time that I saw her, first time I laid eyes on her, I knew I was going to marry that girl. Now, it's been 43 years since then, between dating and being married. And my wife still doesn't believe that story. Except there's one fact. We're married. So I don't know what you do with that. But we've all had these encounters with people that change our life. Sometimes for the better, like me, more than sometimes for the worse. Or there's these moments where you run into somebody and you're so excited you have to tell somebody, or maybe somebody, a friend or family member, and they're like, oh, you will never believe who I saw the other night. Or you're never going to believe who I ran into the other day. There's just so much excitement that they just have to tell somebody. We all have encounters like that where they shape us or reshape us or influence our life in some way. Sometimes they just catch us out of nowhere. Totally unexpected. And that's what we're going to talk about over the next few weeks in a brand new series we have called Encounters. And we're going to talk about what happens with a person who encounters the resurrected Jesus. And so if you don't know anything about the Bible, or if you don't know anything about Jesus, in our Bible, in what's called the New Testament. So your Bible's broken into two, like Old Testament, that was before Jesus, New Testament after Jesus. And so in the New Testament, there are these 4 ancient biographies of Jesus. In the very beginning of your New Testament, they're called Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They're the Gospels. And they tell the story of Jesus. And the reason there's 4 is because they come at it from 4 different angles. In 4 different ways, they talk about Jesus. It would be like somebody following me around and writing about me. Number one, people wouldn't follow me around to write about me, all right? But they would basically say the same thing about my life, but there would be some differences from each one, from their eyes, what they saw, and that's the Gospels. Now, some people have communicated the differences that they see in the Gospels are contradictions. And because they're contradictions, then the Bible loses its credibility and it's not trustworthy, and nothing could be further from the truth. There's an atheist that turned follower of Jesus, and he began to look at these Gospels in kind of an investigative way, like a detective, to see how the stories corroborated each other. And in Cold Case Christianity, he says this: from archaeology to fulfill prophecy, to ancient statements of early non-Christian authors, to the internal evidence of language, proper nouns, and cultural details, the New Testament Gospels are corroborated better than any other ancient text, period. So you can trust them. And so although all of the Gospels talk about the resurrection and encounters that Jesus had with people, we're going to focus in for the next few weeks on just one of them, and that's the Gospel of John. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to John chapter 20, and then what we'll do is we'll fill in some color with some of the other Gospels. And since ladies are always first, gentlemen, we are going to talk about the first encounter Jesus had, and it was with a woman named Mary Magdalene. It was the first person that saw Jesus after he rose from the dead. Now, we don't know a lot about Mary, but what we do know in her first encounter with Jesus is that she was demon-possessed. And so Jesus rescued her from her demon possession, freed her from the bondage that she was in, and then she became one of Jesus' most devout followers. And she followed Jesus all the way to the end. Like, she was with him all the way to the end. She walked into Jerusalem with him on that final week, and she went all the way to the crucifixion. She watched him being crucified on the cross, and then when the body came down, she watched that, and she watched them walk the body to the tomb where they laid Jesus. So to say that Mary was all in with Jesus would be an absolute understatement. She was all the way in. And before we get into this encounter that she has with Jesus in chapter 20, I just want to kind of set the stage before we get into verse 11. And so Mary has already been to the tomb. It was the resurrection morning, so she was coming to the tomb to anoint the body according to Jewish custom. So she was already there. She saw it, saw that there was no body. She turns around and in a panic, she runs back to the disciples to tell them, hey, there's no body. And so the disciples come and they run and they see what she sees, and then they leave the tomb wondering what the heck is happening. But Mary stayed back at the tomb. Now, sit with me just for a second. And what I want to ask you to do is try and get yourself in the sandals of Mary at that moment. Nobody gets over a loved one dying in just a few days. Nobody. Especially someone who claimed to be the Messiah, the long-awaited king who was going to free the Jewish people, this whole nation, from their oppression and injustice. Mary had put her whole hope in him. Everything. She was all in. All of her hopes and dreams. She wasn't the only one, but she was all in with Jesus. And she look, just a few days earlier, she came into Jerusalem, and it was a party. Like they were laying palm branches on the ground, chanting and worshiping, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Like everything was going according to plan. Until it wasn't. And the week unraveled right before her eyes. She went from being incredibly joyous to sitting in despair. I think that's a word that we can use in our English language. This utter sense of loss and hopelessness, where the weight seems too much to bear. Just in between gatherings, prayed with a woman who is just incredibly weighed down with hurt and anger. All of us in this room have experienced some level of despair, hopelessness. All of us in this room have experienced some level of discouragement, some level of disappointment where we put our hope in someone or something only to be let down. And so it crushed our world. That's where Mary was. That's where we find her. Outside the tomb, crying. Verse 11, it picks up. chapter 20 of John. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying as she wept. She bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. And they asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she didn't realize that it was Jesus. She didn't expect him. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?" And thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you carried him away, just tell me where you put him and I'll get him." And then Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned around, cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. That's the one who she had given her allegiance to and had followed. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to the Father, my Father, and now your Father. I'm ascending to my God and now your God." And Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I've seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. What a difference an encounter with the resurrected Jesus makes in the life of a person. Mary arrived at the tomb filled with despair, and then she left filled with hope. That's what an encounter with the resurrected Jesus does. Mary wasn't expecting to encounter Jesus at the tomb. She wasn't expecting it. Some of you walked into this room or you turned on online and you weren't expecting to encounter Jesus. It's Easter. Everybody goes to church on Easter. But you weren't expecting to encounter him. You know about him. You've been to church maybe a few times a year or maybe every single week, but you have never encountered the risen Jesus. What I love about this encounter is that Mary didn't initiate it. She was there, but Jesus did. She came, listen, Mary came expecting nothing. With nothing to offer except her despair. That's how she came. When we come to Jesus, we come with nothing to offer except our despair. The Bible tells us that when we were all born, we were born in sin. Sin separates you from God. Sin brings this despair that there is no way that I can connect with the God of the universe. We come to him with that. But he comes to us with life and forgiveness. She came hopeless. Mary came to that tomb hopeless, with questions, all kinds of questions and confusion and hurt and living in a fog, no way to reconcile all of what was happening in the moment, not able to make sense of it. Ever been there? Ever been in a fog where you just can't reconcile what's happening with you right now? Where you are, how to move forward, what is happening to you in the moment? Mary was there, and Jesus met her right there. So if you're there, wherever you are, lost in your sin or lost in your despair, Jesus meets you right there. And he doesn't only offer you forgiveness of sin and life, he offers you this fulfilling life in the everyday moments of life. When you are living in those moments of despair and you are living in those moments of discouragement, he meets you right there. And he brings hope into those everyday situations. Because the resurrection says the story's not over. The story's not over. He's working something out in your life. And he's making everything new. And so Mary's immediate response was to grab a hold of him. Man, I hope that's going to be somebody's response, that you're in a space where you don't know what else to do. And so you're just going to reach out and you're just going to grab a hold of Jesus because he wants to meet you right where you are. Another one of the gospel writers adds the word worship to how she responded. And Mary arrived at the tomb mourning and she left worshiping. That's what an encounter with the resurrection, with the resurrected Jesus brings into the everyday life of a person. Your life becomes one big response of worship to the one who you can count on. So this past week, I was talking to Pastor Tyler and Pastor Joseph about my message. And I wasn't ready for this. Joseph doesn't even know this, but I wasn't ready for this. So we were talking, and Joseph asks me, he said, so what does the resurrection mean to you? I wasn't ready. I'm the one that asks questions. So I paused for a minute. And I said, everything. It means absolutely everything. It gets me out of bed in the morning. Like it helps me to love my wife the way I should love my wife. It helps me to love my kids. It helps me to love this family at 7 Marks the way I should. It helps me as I interact with people. It means absolutely everything to me. It's the center of my life, and everything else comes around it. I worship him. So let me ask you a question this morning. Who or what are you worshiping? What's the center of your life? Some people work. Work is the center of their life. And everything comes around that. That's what they worship. And when work goes up, they go up. When it comes down, they go down. Because that's what they're looking to fulfill their life with. Work. Some of it, it's money. I'm about the money. I'm about making the money. So you worship money. Your life's centered around money. So when the stock market goes up, you go up. When it goes down, you go down. Because that's what you're putting your hope in. You're worshiping that. You're centering your life in that. Some of you worship power, like being in control. And when you feel that starting to slip away, then you start to control more. Because that's what you center. That's what brings meaning to your life. The fact that you're in control, you're the boss, you're in power. It could be your beauty, it could be intellect, it could be anything. Listen, I'm not saying that those things are bad, so don't misinterpret what I'm saying. I'm just telling you that those things, they were never designed to bring you fulfillment. Those things, they don't have the power to bring you what you're looking for. Only Jesus has that kind of power to bring you meaning and to bring you fulfillment. And so what are you worshiping this morning? One of the things that people worship is religion. Isn't that funny? Hey, trying to earn their way to God, do enough to where God would be pleased. So they put all of their eggs in one basket. I probably shouldn't use that on Easter, but they put everything in that basket of worship. If I do enough, then God's going to accept me. It doesn't work like that. It's about a relationship with him. And Mary was kind of operating in this, like, I don't know what to do now. She came to the tomb with this task to do. Right? She was doing what she knew to do, the Jewish custom. But she was living with this thought of death, of what she just saw, the trauma. And life is now, like she's trying to, like, what's life look like now for me? No hope, no excitement, no expectation, no passion, nothing. But her encounter with Jesus changed all that. She came with a task to do, remembering the cross, but she left with a life to live in the power of the resurrection. That's what happens when you encounter the resurrected Jesus. Look, the cross is incredibly important. We started the whole gathering talking about the cross. The cross of Jesus took care of all of our sin. Without the cross, there is no forgiveness of sin. See, sin that separates you and I from God, it has to be dealt with. And none of us in this room or watching online could deal with that. The wrath of God, the punishment of God for our sin had to be dealt with, and Jesus dealt with that on the cross through his shed blood. It brought forgiveness of sin, so the cross is incredibly important. But if Christ never raised from the dead, then there's no hope. There's no hope over sin. There's no hope over death. There's no hope over the grave. But he did rise from the dead. And it guarantees forgiveness. And it guarantees life and life abundant. Yes, we celebrate this ancient historical fact, but we also celebrate this living historical fact that brought life to his followers, and it brings life to us. Not just the forgiveness of sin, but life to the fullest every single day when you encounter Jesus. And so as I close, I just want to tell you, I've been praying for you all week. I started praying for you last week. Sunday afternoon, left here, got home, and I immediately started thinking about today and praying for you. And I prayed for 3 groups of people in this room. The first, I prayed for you that are family to me, like 7 Mark's family. Come every week, and my prayer for you is that you would be reawakened by the resurrection of Jesus. That you would know that the resurrected Jesus gives you hope every single day. And my prayer is that it would dictate your steps and how you love people and how you interact with people. So that was my first prayer. My second prayer was for people that are away from Jesus. Like, you know Jesus, you have a relationship, but it's been a while. You've moved away from it. And like, I need to get back in church. I need to get back in my relationship with Jesus. But it's not been a strong enough urge to get you going. And so my prayer has been for you, that you would come back to Jesus. Not with shame, not with guilt, but because your Father in heaven loves you and he sent his son Jesus for you. And when you embrace him, then he dictates your life. He informs and impacts your whole life. So that was the second group. The third group were for the people in here that don't know Jesus, that haven't met Jesus like I have. I can just tell you from personal experience, he has changed my life. He's ordered my life. He's everything to me. And I want that for you. He will forgive all of your sin. And then he will give you a life that you were always designed to live. And you will find what you're looking for. Would you pray with me? With heads bowed and eyes closed. If you're that person in here that doesn't know Jesus, right where you're seated, you may not understand everything, but you can simply say, Jesus, if that's who you are, if you died on the cross to forgive me of my sin, and you rose again to free me, give me life, abundant life. Like, I want that. So please come into my life. Forgive me and come into my life. I surrender my life to you. And if that's you, I'm just going to invite you. We're going to sing in a minute. I want to be standing down front. If you want to come up front, just if you want help with that, if you want somebody to pray over you, then I'll be here to do that. And if not, I would just tell you to email me or our elders this week at elders@sevenmarkschurch.com. Elders, ELDERS @sevenmarkschurch.com. Because I'd love to sit down with coffee with you this week or one of our elders or staff and just talk to you about Jesus and what it means to follow him. So I'll be available right while we're singing. And then for the others of you who have already accepted Jesus as your Lord and Savior and committing to follow him, man, I'm just going to invite you just to talk to him and ask him to reawaken your soul to him and the resurrected power that you have in you.